3 weeks ago I arrived in Mexico, and since being here I've had some of the best experiences of my life and met some incredible people. Seen enough lizards to satisfy me for the next 5 years, and most important of all, I haven't been eaten by a shark, crocodile or a jaguar yet. But over the last 3 weeks I've been experiencing one of the biggest internal conflicts of my life. And that has been my inability to do nothing. Nothing. Zilcho. No phone, no laptop, no YouTube, no music, no conversations, no calls, no meetings, no productivity, no to-do list, no wrangling of a purpose from my day so I can reflect back on my day in the evening and think, oh, I was productive today, I got everything on my to-do list done, so I can now justify my existence to the world. No, none of that. No tasks, no duties, no striving for success, nothing. Since being here, I have tried to give myself the permission to just sit and look at a wall, ceiling, floor, or whatever is in front of me and just do nothing. But I have wrangled and wormed every encounter I have had with that nothingness to try and escape it. And it turns out this has been the biggest internal conflict I've been experiencing since I was about 16 or 17. So it hasn't just been a conflict over the last 3 weeks of my life, it's been a conflict over the last 7 years of my life. If this conflict sounds familiar, join the club. Glad to have you on board. So within these last 3 weeks, last weeks especially, I've been trying to think about why it's so hard for us to just do nothing. And I found 2 reasons. Then I went a bit further and found 4 practical mindset shifts we can adopt to do nothing with less guilt. But first of all, why would you want to do nothing in the first place? Well, in my experience, it's because doing nothing is the only way you can restore yourself in a world that wants to do nothing but drain your energy. In the space of nothingness, or the space of nothingness, is the only place you can visit to connect yourself with your intuition and your inner guiding compass. By shutting out all of the external noise so you can go within. But that isn't to say that nothingness is incredibly, or that isn't to say that nothingness isn't incredibly uncomfortable. Hence, most of us don't do nothing, and we occupy ourselves with tasks and duties, nose to the grindstone, ticking things off our to-do list so that we can keep at bay any uncomfortable feelings or thoughts or memories or affirmations we have about ourselves. Those are some of the reasons why doing nothing would be useful, outside the context of just saying it's going to make you more productive or outperform the competition. No. Which leads us in to our first reason why doing nothing is so hard. The first reason is because, well, you're terrified of what you might find in that nothingness. And what might you find? Well, to put it bluntly, Lewis, I hope you're listening. What you will find in the nothingness is everything you avoid by staying busy. All of the thoughts, emotions, traumas and memories and things you think about yourself that you try to keep at bay for as long as you can throughout the day. That's the uncomfortable material that arises in the nothingness. So it's no wonder we don't do nothing and we stay plugged in to our phones, to music, to conversation, to chatter, to gossip, to external noise. Because we don't want to face the discomfort. But I can guarantee one thing that you will find within that nothingness. And remember, by nothing we mean literally sat in a chair like this, just staring at a wall, trying to get nothing from the experience but doing nothing. I can tell you one thing that you will find in that nothingness: the quality of your life. As Naval Ravikant says, to measure the quality of your life, simply do nothing and see how it feels. So you can be damn near sure that if you're feeling slightly disgruntled at the quality of your life right now, you're going to have to face that reality even more intensely by embracing nothingness. So let's keep that nothingness at bay for a little bit. Let's just busy ourselves. Let's busy yourself with your to-do list and your productivity and your constant striving for more, so as to delay the confrontation of the fact that you don't like your current life quality. That's another reason why you would avoid the nothingness. Because you will have to confront that reality. Now, of course, I am not saying that you have a low quality of life. My hope is that you don't, but if you do, that's fine. Of course, we all need to change some things. I'm simply elaborating on this point to demonstrate just how uncomfortable it can be to embrace nothingness. Because this is one of the things that you're going to encounter directly, head on. You do nothing, you feel guilty for it. Potential signal that you have a low quality of life. You do nothing and you feel blissful within that nothingness, even though uncomfortable material is inevitably going to arise. Potential signal that you have a slightly higher quality of life. Another reason why it's so hard to do nothing, moving on, is because when everyone is sick, we no longer consider it a disease. Which is another way of saying most people struggle to do nothing. So whenever you do nothing, and you do it when you're surrounded by people you know, close friends, your family, or just society in general, other people will look at you as if you are a weirdo. Why are they doing nothing? Look at him, just sat around. Who does he think he is? Billy Big Bollocks, just staring into the abyss. What a detriment to society he is. Why don't you get off your backside and do something productive for the rest of us, or actually contribute to society? Those are some of the things or judgments that are going to be thrown at you when other people see you doing nothing. Hence, a large reason why doing nothing is so difficult is because you feel guilty for doing nothing. But here's something I've learned about guilt. It largely manifests as the word should in your head. Sentences along the lines of, you're doing nothing and you're trying to give yourself that space and that energetic restoration, but you hear the voices of, I should be doing something, I should be doing something productive, I should be working on this thing, I should be helping this person, I should be justifying my existence more to the world. Whenever you hear the word should, that is not your voice. It is the voice of someone from your childhood. It is the voice of a content creator whose message you've been absorbing online, or it is the voice of society at large. Any sentence you say to yourself with the word should is not your voice. Everyone is sick, so we no longer consider it a disease. To quote a book that I'm currently reading at the moment, which I would highly recommend, even though I'm only 10% in, so that was a bit of a risky recommendation. The book is called Soothe, and it is a book all about how to regulate your nervous system. But to quote the author, whose name eludes me, let me quickly check what her name is, Navid de Belgione. Bit French. If you're French, sorry for that pronunciation. To quote a little section from this book, she says, We live in a culture where doing too much is encouraged. Too much work, too much socialising, too many different activities, too much food, too much alcohol, and no time to process any of it. All in service of seeming to live more. Because our senses are so heightened with stimuli, we only seem to have two speeds, full throttle or exhausted. And both speeds are socially approved states. How many people do you know who push their bodies to the max with work and then again in their non-work lives? Because being productive or busy is seen as the most valid way to spend our time. Sometimes it seems that our physical practices support this culture too. There is meditation to make employees more productive, spinning classes with a spiritual happy ending, yoga to sell yoga wear, and other spiritual knickknacks in an attempt to give our lives meaning. Lastly, but what if ambition, speed, and acquisition were not the only human goals? What if we also valued sensing, exploring, learning, the beauty of the process, resting, creating, pausing, resetting, repairing, calibrating, or even compassionately being? I wanted to include that quote because I love what she says, to put it bluntly. She also highlights another reason why allowing yourself space and time to do nothing is so restorative. Because you allow yourself to digest experiences. My God, we live in a world nowadays. I don't usually like to do this and be like this old man in his armchair rattling on about the world, but even when I see myself come across the Instagram accounts or YouTube accounts of other people, I can't help but adopt the desires of other people who are flashing their fancy lifestyle, and suddenly I find myself wanting the things that they want just because they have it or want it, and I feel again as if I cannot justify my existence if I'm not constantly exploring and experiencing and doing new things and capturing it to share it with people. But again, that highlights the only problem, which is the opposite of nothingness. In doing that constant occupation and activity, no matter what it is, you're denying yourself the opportunity to have pauses within that activity after you do it to absorb the activity and the experience and the wisdom and the lesson. Because I want to make it very clear in this video, I'm not coming at this topic with the perspective of we should all be doing nothing all of the time. Clearly not. I'm arguing in favour for periodized nothingness, especially after big periods of your life or big experiences, or simply just 1 hour to 30 minutes to 1 hour a day of nothingness. I'm coming at it from a very practical lens. Mainly from the lens of it allows you to digest things that are happening in your life. So that you're not constantly moving on to the next thing. No, it's the same when you read a book. If you're constantly engaged with the reading of material, instead of giving yourself time and space after you read something to allow everything to download within your intuition, then you're damaging the process of your learning. I really like that quote from that book. Everyone is wriggling and worming to justify their existence with external performance. So by doing nothing, you are a very big exception. Again, not in the sense of you have to do it to become more productive, although it will make you more productive. Not in the sense of you have to do it to become more successful, although it will make you more successful. None of that. Doing nothing for the art of restoration of your life. By simply doing it, other people are going to look at you, as we've mentioned, as if to say, oh, look at him doing nothing. Just a quick story to elaborate on how rare it is to just do nothing. Last August of 2024, I was on a coach after returning from a holiday to Mallorca with my two best friends, Joe and Joe. I was sat on a coach in Bristol, which is in the southwest of England. And I had to take that coach to get to London, which was about a 3-hour journey. after returning home from the holiday. I needed to get back to the southeast of Kent. So I was walking up the aisle of the coach, I was trying to find a seat. All of the seats were taken, but to the top left of the coach, I saw a open seat. Not by the window, the one closer to the aisle. And on the right of that seat, so by the window seat, I saw a very attractive young lady sat there. So, being a young man myself, I thought, oi oi, 3 hours, coach journey. I want to start a conversation with her. So, I sat down, I put all of my things in the upper compartment, so my bag was out of the way and I had space for my feet. I sat my backside down on the seat and I went to say hello to her, but I realised she had her earphones in and she was looking out of the window. So the coach departs, we make the 3-hour pilgrimage to London, but 10 minutes into the coach journey, I still hadn't said a word to her. And I really wanted to start a conversation, but I had no idea how to. But 15 minutes have gone by now, 20 minutes have gone by, and I still haven't said a word. I had no idea how to start a conversation from completely nothing. But suddenly she started to rummage with her bag down by her feet, as if to look for something. But I could see that her bag was too big for the space in which her feet occupied. So I realised that that was my opportunity to start a conversation. So I turned to her, lightly tapped her on the shoulder and said, "Excuse me, love, do you want me to put your bag up there so it's out of your way?" So she turned towards me, looking a bit flustered because she was just rummaging around close to the floor. She took her earphone out, asked me to repeat the question. I repeated it. She looked at me for about 5 seconds. She said, "Yeah, okay, that's fine." Handed me her bag and I put it in the upstairs compartment. So after I put her bag there, I sat back down, now feeling a little bit more nervous because I had a perfect opportunity to start the conversation. I sat down and I simply said to her, now her earphone was out, "So what takes you to London?" And we began a conversation for the next 2 hours. The 30 minutes in after I started that conversation with this lovely young lady, she turned to me while I was responding to her question of what do I do, what is my job, and she cut me short and she interrupted me. She said, "Hold on, Lewis, I've just realised something." So halfway through what I was explaining, I turned to look towards her, feeling slightly irritated at the fact I was interrupted, but open to what she had to say. I said, What have you realised?" And this young lady looked me in the eyes with her beautiful blue eyes and said, "I've just realised that for the first 10 to 15 minutes of this coach journey, you didn't say anything to me." So now feeling a bit more nervous at being called out, I said, "Okay." And then she continued with, "Was your plan literally just to sit there for the whole coach journey, without your phone, without earphones and without music, and to just raw dog life?" A bit perplexed at what raw dog life means outside of another context, I asked her to explain what it means, and she said, "Well, raw dog life is when you're not plugged into anything. You're just observing whatever's in your environment like an old person. Was that literally your plan for 3 hours? You was just going to sit there and do nothing?" So again, still feeling a bit complexed, I responded to her with, "Well, yeah, I guess so. I wanted to speak to you, but if you didn't want to speak to me, I would have just sat there." But she just could not understand how my plan was to just sit and raw dog life. And I kept this story in the notes for this video because it's always stuck with me, just seeing how surprised she was at the fact that I was going to do nothing on this coach journey. And it's always stuck with me, especially within this context, at just how, "Really? You was going to do nothing?" That was her reaction. Again, this highlights how doing nothing is a very big exception that a lot of other people aren't going to accept. That's where the guilt comes from, in that nothingness. So now we've covered the 2 reasons why doing nothing is so difficult. 1, because you're terrified of what you might find, all of the things you avoid by being busy. And number 2, everyone is sick, so we no longer consider it a disease. Now let's move on to finalise this video with the practical shifts that are going to help you do nothing with less guilt and with more permission from yourself. The first practical shift is something that I've realised just this week, a few days ago, and that is I now no longer see constant busyness in myself or other people as a sign of internal security or stillness. In fact, I see it as very much the opposite. This is going to sound judgmental, but now when I see someone who is constantly occupied, constantly busy, nose to the grindstone, productivity, go, 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 and when I see that in myself, all I can think is, oh, okay, cool, brilliant, you're being very productive at the moment. But what are you hiding from? What is your constant busyness helping you escape? I now no longer see constant busyness as a sign of internal security or stillness. I see the ability to do nothing for periods at a time as a brilliant indicator of internal stillness and security. Or, failing that I see it as feedback that this person is on a quest for internal security and stillness. To elaborate on this one point further, one of my favourite quotes from the Indian philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti, who had such a nonsensical approach to life. If you ever watch any of his lectures, you'll see this comes out in his answering of his students' questions. Jiddu Krishnamurti said, "The greater the outward show, the greater the inward poverty." There are so many ways we could say this. Confidence is calm, ego is loud. If you have to say you are, you aren't. The bigger the front, the bigger the back. But this in particular just hits so many things at once. The greater the outward show, the greater the inward poverty. But specifically within this context, the way that I apply this to the context of doing nothing is the constant busyness. The outward show for me is the busyness, which signals an inward poverty. Flipping that on its head, the inward richness comes from a lack of an outward show, a lack of, or an unwillingness to occupy yourself all of the time so as to perform like a monkey, so as to show other people just how productive you are so you can get a slight bit of validation. That's inward poverty. And constant busyness only leads to inward poverty, in my personal opinion. And look, it's worth me mentioning here that in this video I am not arguing against productivity, discipline, routine, structure, none of those things, because these are things that I enjoy at times and I still will do. I'm arguing against us using them so as to avoid things that we really need to tend to, which is the nothingness and everything we're going to find within it. Second practical shift, 3 more before we finalise this video. You can only get used to yourself in the space of nothingness. You can never really tell when dogs are going to bark. Pure randomness. Black swans. We continue. You can only get used to yourself in the space of nothingness. In the same way as you can only become a better runner by running, a better writer by writing, a better speaker by speaking, a better listener by listening. The only place you can visit to become more familiar with yourself is in the nothingness. And again, why would you want to do that? Well, again, to quote Naval Ravikant, in the same way as a low resting heart rate is the consequence of intense physical exercise, low anxiety is the result of intense self-examination. Ven acá, al respeto. Estoy hablando sobre por qué es tan difícil de hacer nada. Grabando un video. Nos vemos cuando termino, ¿ok? Mi amigo. Let me repeat that. In the same way as a low resting heart rate is the consequence of intense physical exercise, Low anxiety is the result of intense self-examination. The only way to become familiar with yourself is within the nothingness. And the reason why you would want to do that is because that is the best way to build a better, more beneficial relationship with yourself. There's no other way you're going to be able to do that. There's no occupying your mind with a certain activity that is going to enable you to do that, other than sitting and being with yourself. Again, getting to know your front porch, figuratively speaking. Embrace the nothingness, self-awareness increases. Because by the nature of embracing the nothingness, you're going to become aware of all the things that you usually avoid. And if you become aware of all of those things, well then you're going to become more familiar with them, and you're not going to waste time throughout your day trying to escape those things. Because, again, using the analogy of all of the things that you avoid are like the waves of all of the thoughts and emotions you avoid. When you embrace the nothingness, they overwhelm you. But by them overwhelming you, that's the only space that you can cultivate that skill of surfing the waves when they come. Most importantly, with the realization that they do come and go, the waves. Some thoughts. Second to last. We've mentioned it a little bit before, but the second of... Let's have a drink. Let's have a drink. The second to last mindset shift to help you do nothing slightly better is doing nothing is restoration. It's not depletion. So this allows you to give yourself more permission to do nothing, because you see it as a way of restoring your energy, again, from a world that just wants to deplete you. If you think about an evolutionary example, back ages ago, caveman times, we would have gone out hunting, and just me and you, we go out, 3 hours of hunting, we finally find an animal, I chuck my spear towards the animal, completely miss, you chuck your spear towards the animal and you get it. You are the ascendant in the status game, because I tried to do something, failed, you did it and you succeeded. But anyway, we're both happy because we've got food, and as we're walking back to camp and we're trekking over those 3 hours, of course we're cavemen. I don't have Spotify to put a podcast on, music, or I don't have someone to call and speak to during that time. For those 3 hours while we're carrying that animal back, my mind will naturally restore itself and unpack that experience as I'm walking. So too it goes when you cultivate that nothingness. You allow yourself time to not only digest experiences, but to therapize them. Allowing your biology to recoup in its own way. And the final thing I'll comment on that is just the importance of the amount of time doing nothing would have saved me in my life during periods of transition. When I was 22, so 3 years ago, I moved back from Poland. I used to live there. Some of you guys know that. I used to live there for 1.5 years because my ex-girlfriend was Polish, but I realised that I wanted to return to the UK. So I made that transition. I returned back, moved back into my mum's place to live with her for a brief period of time. But 6 months after I returned to the UK, I was in the worst state I had ever been in my life. Because as soon as I returned, like that, I plunged my head into distractions, addictions, technology, YouTube, all of that stuff. I was in a state of heavy addiction. Because what that offered me was avoidance of the reality that I was dealing with a very big existential crisis. I had returned home after living independently since I was 18. I was dealing with new, uncomfortable emotions and thoughts and difficulties of self-worth. But I didn't want to unpack that. So 6 months had gone by and I was in a terrible state, but I didn't understand why until I unplugged, allowed myself to do nothing for about 2 weeks and just went on long walks, and I realised, oh, I've been struggling with this transition much more than I thought. But it's funny for me to reflect on situations like that in my life, because I do look back on those times with regret. I think about that period of 6 months and how low I felt and depressed and, suicidal at times. It was a horrible period of my life because I had got myself into such a rut just by avoiding the nothingness. And that 6 months went by. That was a long time of suffering, which I now reflect on now and think, all it would have taken is 1 week. All it would have taken is, as soon as I return from the UK, unplug from everything, allow myself to do nothing and sit in that discomfort, spew in it, worm in it, wriggle in it, and realise whatever I needed to realise. And I would have realised what I know now, which is when you cultivate that nothingness, you get little sprouts, little inklings, little seedlings of purpose, of ideas, of directions that you can try, and maybe it fails and then you develop it and you iterate on it, or you just have a vision of some sort, but you have no idea when that vision is going to come. If there's one warning I could give you, it is that. If you're ever going through a transition in your life, or you're feeling stuck, lost, confused, depressed, or you've hit rock bottom, all of the things that you feel are helping you at the moment probably aren't. Hence, you're still in this state. So the only really important thing to do is to go into it further, unarmed, pure vulnerability, and to sit in it for weeks, days, hours, however long it takes, until you feel you can shed whatever has happened completely, digest it, close the loop, let the forest fire burn so new growth can appear. We got a bit philosophical then. That's what happens when you start reflecting on your life. But to wrap this all up, to avoid repeating myself, the last mindset shift I'm going to offer you is, or I would suggest to you, is start evaluating your days based on presence instead of productivity. It's a brilliant place to cultivate presence, the nothingness, because you have nothing else to do other than to sit with what is. And as we've spoken about a few times throughout this video, our inability to do nothingness is a symptom of us placing our self-worth in the things that we do, and constantly evaluating our self-worth and our existence in the world based on how many things we tick off of our to-do list. So we wake up into the day already at a productivity debt. You wake up and you constantly think about all of the things you should be doing. Pardon me for being so rude, that was not me. That was my food. And you wake up in the morning already at a productivity debt, thinking, oh, I have to do all of this, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And you're only going to be able to pay off this debt, you convince yourself, if you do everything that you have put down on your to-do list. And then only then, those 10 minutes before you go to bed, reflecting on your day, if you have done everything that was on your to-do list, then you get that brief period of self-worth. I've lived like that for the last 7 years of my life, and I'm telling you, it's a wretched way to live. So consider this shift of evaluating your days based on presence instead of productivity. Sometimes that's all it takes. An hour a day of doing nothing. Or if you want to go really at it, unplug completely for a week. Because those are your choices. You either live years of a miserable, heavy, high tension, spewing, productivity focused life where you're constantly trying to justify your existence, or you unplug for a week and realise everything you need to, and you allow yourself that space and time to reconnect with your intuition and restore. Honestly, I had no idea where this video was going to go. I put down some very vague notes, but I wanted to treat this video more as a exploration together, because I don't have all the answers, and this is a skill that I'm still practicing. I want to let you know that over the next few days and weeks, I'm going to be practicing this. I'm going to be sat in a chair out there spewing in my discomfort and understanding that this might last a long time until I actually realise something or get something useful from the nothingness. But that's a skill I want to have. I want to be able to do nothing and not feel guilty for it. Because I don't want to continue avoiding things, thoughts, emotions. I want to surf the waves of them. And I invite you to do the same. An hour a day. Pick a time. Between 6 and 7. Unplug from everything and just sit. No focus. As mentioned, if you want to go further, you can do it for a whole week. Book somewhere special if you can. Go somewhere special if you can. Or just stay where you are and get rid of, or give your mate all of your technology and let him know that you're not going to use any of it for the next week. All with the intention of becoming a better surfer. So with that said, stay disciplined, playful, and dangerous. I'll see you at the beach. Bring your surfboard. Adios, muchachos y muchachas.